From To Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello Keto lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein scaled to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guest each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history and so have access to the bigger picture. Thank you, Heidi Cuthbertson, for supporting me in this podcast by making a pledge at my Patreon page. Do you want to hear your name here at the top of the show? Are you enjoying this podcast and would like to help me make more episodes? Then head to my Patreon page at patreon.com/KetoWoman or hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. It means a great deal to me and you will get to headline the show just like Heidi did today. This week's extraordinary woman is Claire McDonnell Liu. Claire managed her daughter's debilitating epilepsy condition and her son's alopecia and eczema with low-carb and keto real foods, medication-free. Claire has since qualified as a naturopathic nutrition advisor, specialised in supporting women and families to make changes to their health using food. Her nutrition programs are real food, sugar-free, low-carb, high-fat, keto-focused. Their children's incredible results have inspired Claire and her husband Justin to launch their non-profit site leafy.org. They are helping families to change up their everyday foods by swapping processed sugary stuff with simple snacks and meals through their programs and resources. The Leafy Sugar-Free Family course is a perfect starting point for families taking first steps to change their everyday foods. This is the free course that Claire mentioned in the podcast. The Leafy Special Education Needs School Food Programme, supporting pupils' individual needs, and Inspiring Food as Medicine Success Stories. Claire and I met at the PHC conference in London earlier this year, and you might remember me mentioning her and the lecture she gave in episode 32. Her presentation stood out because she was an ordinary, I'm doing air quotes when I say that, person sharing her family's story. It fit so well with my extraordinary woman philosophy that I knew I had to have her share that story with you on the podcast. She also turned the tables on me when we had finished recording and interviewed me for her website, where she has some videos of people who share how they have used real food to improve their health. There's an ongoing fundraiser to help them fund the work they do with leafy.org, and the details will be in the show notes if you want to find out more. Welcome, Claire, to the Keto Woman Podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, Daisy. Yeah, I'm really good. It's a lovely day and it's lovely to be chatting with you.
Yes, I'm looking at you, looking over your shoulder to your fabulous garden and the sunshine, and it just looks absolutely wonderful.
Yes, we're really, really lucky. We were just chatting about it, weren't we? It's like a really pretty area in Leicestershire. We're at the north of Leicestershire near Derbyshire, and we've got a massive back garden. So on a sunny day like this, it just looks great.
It looks fantastic. I'm looking at that lawn thinking how much my dogs, especially this new little lurcher who's full of beans, would love to be zooming around.
Yeah, our kids absolutely love it. So we've got a tree house at the end, and there's some talk of having a zip wire at some stage. And
oh, that sounds like fun.
I'm not sure about it yet, but we'll see. But we've got an allotment and we've got hens. So yes, a little bit of the good life, really.
Oh, fresh eggs. Oh, there's nothing like it, is there?
No, they're brilliant. We've only got a few and a cockerel. So we've got a noisy cockerel in the morning, but we've got fresh eggs. So perfect for scrambled eggs in the morning. It is good. We do feel pretty lucky actually being here.
I love that though, actually. Once you get used to it, I think when you first get a cockerel, it's like 4 o'clock or whatever in the morning, it wakes you up. But you do get used to it. It's a lovely country sound, actually. I love it.
Yes. I don't mind it at all. I think some of the neighbours probably wouldn't agree. They're a bit closer than we are to him. But he's lovely. His name's Cuddle. We didn't realise he was a cockerel for quite a while. So we're not probably natural farmers. But yeah, he's lovely. Lovely to see him strolling and strutting.
They do strut, don't they?
He does. He's like a grandfather. He looks after them all. He's lovely.
Well, we met earlier this year at the wonderful PHC conference in London, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I really, really enjoyed the presentation that you did and just knew that my listeners would love to hear your story. So without further ado, let's hear that story.
Oh, thank you. And it was lovely to meet you. It was really brief. I was in a bit of a tears afterwards. It was straight after I'd spoken, and there was quite a few people around and chatting. But
well, very nerve-wracking, I should imagine. You were up on that stage in front of, I'm not sure how many, few hundred people, I should think. I did feel for you.
I know. And after Tim Noakes as well. So, a few after, but on the same day. But it was utterly, utterly amazing, the whole conference. I just thought it was just, and the people there, and to be amongst such positive people was brilliant, who really, really believe in real foods and using food as for health. It was great. I loved it. It felt like such a buzz after having shared our story.
I did too. Yeah, and a wonderful, wonderful mix of people. You know, lots of GPs and personal trainers and all sorts of people that I mixed with and interviewed, got some little interviews from. There was a really great mix of people, as well as, you know, all the typical presenters and people like yourself. It was really good fun, wasn't it?
It was good and great location. But so I shared our family story about how we got into food and how, I suppose, our journey really over the last few years. So I'm mum to 2 children now. Rudy's now 8, and I've got Leafy who's 6. And so I guess I'd say we're a pretty typical family. When Rudy was very, very young, so he started to develop skin problems, and that was initially cradle cap that went over his forehead and was really persistent and really irritating, and then later on, he developed eczema, and he also developed, when we introduced food, he developed welts and also red marks around his mouth, and wherever he came into contact with foods, he developed either red patches or little bubbles along his chest. And we got him checked out, and I mean, it wasn't a particular concern in that he wasn't having breathing difficulties. It wasn't very serious, but it was a concern to us that there was an underlying issue, and it was a niggle and causing irritation. And then the eczema developed, and it became worse and worse until he was bleeding. He was scratching all the time, and it really affected his sleep. And me and my husband Justin, we were looking into as you do what you can do about it. We were going to the hospital, going to the doctor to get to have appointments, and we were given emollients and different lotions and potions and creams. We tried them all, and we did the natural creams as well that we bought off the internet ourselves, and then we also looked at elimination diets and eliminated the key foods that people react to and cause intolerances. So we eliminated eggs for a few weeks, we eliminated dairy for a few weeks, and it didn't seem to have any effect at all. And it wasn't one particular food. It was becoming multiple kind of things he would react to. So he'd react to dust, particularly. He'd react to mold spores. If he touched a piece of wood, he would come up in bubbles along his arm, welts. So yeah, it continued and became more and more of a problem for us. And this is how we initially got into to foods, because after changing hospitals and after trying all of the creams and realizing that we were only being directed and we were only treating, generally it was topical creams, we were just treating the symptoms. And when I was asking if we could look at the underlying causes, we were told no, it's not really what we do. We don't particularly look into them. We don't do any more testings or investigations on the NHS. It's not what we do for eczema. And he was also having patches of his hair fall out as well. So he was diagnosed with urticaria, which was the welts and the bubbles, eczema and alopecia. So autoimmune problems, but they weren't being linked together. So I was concerned that we weren't linking them together. We weren't investigating them, and it was really having an effect on him. He was becoming quite distressed about it. He was lacking sleep, and we were lacking sleep as well.
That just seems crazy, though, that they just are insisting on treating the symptoms. So, this child has to live in, almost constant distress, at least, but irritation and pain, and like you say, not sleeping properly and things, and let's just try and treat it topically, treat those symptoms. But surely you want to try and get rid of that distress, not treat it.
Absolutely. We're putting a mask over, we're just masking the symptoms, and that was very much my thoughts. And actually I had a really good conversation with the doctor at the second hospital, and he was in agreement. He was like, well, we're not getting to the root causes of these problems, and we're just going to keep suggesting emollients, and maybe one eventually will work, maybe he'll grow out of it, maybe it will deteriorate like other children's does. So I felt that, that was I really liked how frank he was about it, actually. And it just made me realise that the emphasis was back on us as parents to see what we could do. And we're like other parents. We got specialist pyjamas, and I got mittens for him to wear at night to try and reduce the scratching. I put patches over the areas that he was scratching the most because he was causing damage, and that was really, really bleeding. So I was trying to protect those areas. I made my own skin balm out of deer fat, as you do. And that was quite protective and nourishing. But we were really concerned we weren't getting to the root cause. So along the reading and looking into bits and pieces, we came across Weston A. Price, reading and information. And that was a dentist who many years ago went and visited different Indigenous communities and did a whole research and investigation on why they weren't suffering from the type of illnesses and disease, and particularly dental problems was his focus. And he came across that they were eating natural foods, old-fashioned traditional foods, and embracing fats, and that really, really struck a chord. It just made perfect sense. We're in the developed world where our children are coming down with asthma and eczema and all sorts of different conditions that Indigenous populations wouldn't get. But if people move here from developing countries they're then within 10 years as likely as our population to get these health problems. So looking at diet, we put Osson on a restricted diet. We'd already changed his diet. We already thought we ate quite healthily. We were making our own homemade pasta sauces, and we were making his treats and out of dates. But that, we realized that was probably exacerbating his problem. So we took away the dates, bananas, lots and lots of fruit that he was having, and we replaced it with basic old-fashioned traditional foods. So eggs were in. I think he was eating avocados at the time. That was okay. And lots and lots and lots of stews and broths, and he was having those. And at that age, it was absolutely simple to swap. He just liked food.
How old was he at this point?
He would have been around 2 years old.
Right.
Maybe in between 2 and 3, that this was going on. Probably near 3, actually, when we went on the diet for 3 months with him. And it was repetitive, the same type of foods. I look back and I kind of think of it as traditional fashion foods. And yeah, his skin, the first thing I noticed with his skin was that he was itching less. And which meant that the really, really sore, raw areas of his skin started to be able to recover. And I was having to kind of patch him up less at night. I wasn't having to chase him around telling him not to itch, which wasn't helping him at all anyway. But yeah, the itching and the irritation went within weeks. And then over the course of 3 months, his skin repaired and became, by the end of 3 months, I've got before and after photo. His skin was just glowing as it should be, just like healthy, happy. I could put him in short sleeves again, put him in shorts again, and we actually went on a family holiday, and he was able to swim in the sea and paddle around without screaming in pain from the salt water on his scratches. So yeah, it was dramatic, and we felt like, wow, food is awesome, and the power of food, the power of family diets in tackling something is amazing. When we went back and spoke to our doctors and our hospitals, it felt very much as though it was it's not taken on board, it's not taken seriously. It was more of a case of probably he outgrew it quite quickly, dramatically. But I don't feel still that they take on board that nutrition is a factor in creating these problems, and also a major consideration in tackling a variety of health problems.
So what did they say then? Because I mean, they must have been amazed at the change. Did they just simply put it down to coincidence that he grew out of it?
We didn't have huge conversations about it. We said what we'd done, and it was kind of a shrug off, really, like that was it, not particularly interested. I mean, it's always tricky because it's they're really busy, and they can do what they can do. They're very much having to deal with protocols and follow information, follow advice that's been set down and guidance that's been set for them. So they can't really take on lots of information, but it's a real shame. I think that's a major problem we have with our health service, that changes don't come around quick enough. We don't learn from case studies. We don't learn from maybe anecdotal, but we don't seem to move fast enough and take new ideas on board. Exactly.
It's so frustrating, isn't it, when you've seen such a dramatic and relatively quick change. You feel like you want to go and sit in the waiting rooms of all those other parents having similar problems and say, look what we did. It's just a shame that you can't give that feedback to the doctors, who can then pass that on, not necessarily as, this is going to be your magic cure, but this is something you might want to try, because all it is, changing what you eat. It's nothing radical, and it might have this profound effect. What you mentioned that you reduced the sugars. What else did you do in terms of changing diet? How much was he by then eating things like, was he eating things like pasta and those kind of things? Did you cut all of those? Was it a general dropping of carbohydrates as well?
It was a dropping of carbohydrates. And now later on, I would say that was a very low carbohydrate diet. At the time, I didn't think of it as a low carbohydrate. I was aware that we were cutting sugars and we were learning about sugars for the first time. So pasta, we were making him things like homemade tomato and garlic arrabbiata pasta. So the pasta had to go. And potatoes and bread and rice cakes and crackers. He was quite attracted to, or he was quite a carb child. He really was drawn to carbs, and so those were the things that went. And also, I'd always been fairly conscious of kind of giving him lots of different vegetables, but the sweeter vegetables, carrots and things like that. Anything that's high starch or high sweetness, and lots of fruit. I think dates was a big kind of reality check, because we thought we were doing the right thing in replacing, not that he had much kind of shop bought sweets and that kind of thing, but we'd actually gone overboard on making him healthy treats, because we just thought that was so great. Bananas and dates and chocolate, and they have almonds in, and they're amazing. So that went, and he had lots of nuts and seeds and eggs, avocado, and lots of meat and vegetables, but low starch. So it was really the beginning of, and we also did lots of sauerkraut and gut kind of food, and there was yogurt in there, and we started kind of getting into kefir and kombucha and things like that. And he tolerated all new tastes, and he liked it. So yeah, there was a big emphasis on gut healing as well.
It's a mainstay of the kind of snacky things that are carried around, aren't they? I'm thinking of my niece and nephews, of they're getting a bit older now, but as they were in those very early years, the kind of snacks that are carried around, and there are all these, healthy, I'm doing speech marks here, products that are put out there now, but they are still very carb heavy, aren't they? The different kind of crisps and vegetable crisps and various sort of snacky things. But I suppose in some ways they might be potentially healthier than previous options. I don't know, but they're still very carb heavy, aren't they? It's very tricky to avoid them, really, in the sort of children's food products in the supermarkets.
Yeah, it's super, super hard to avoid them. Every single toddler group we were going to, every single play date, everywhere we went, there were these children's options that are deemed to be healthier. And they're the coated rice cakes. I mean, I don't know what that chemical stuff that they're coating it is with it. But rice cakes is really, really popular. Raisins, it was really, really popular. And lots and lots and lots of fruits.
And those pouches. My nephews and niece like those pouches that they sort of almost inhale in one go, but I don't think any of those exist that aren't really pretty carby.
Yeah, full of sweeteners, probably full of sugars and chemicals. I don't know what's in those.
But a lot of them are very natural, but they're still, they're still very sweet because children, like all of us do, like these sweet tastes. So they're all full of fruits or starchy vegetables as a component, even if they're not, pure banana or whatever. They quite often have a large component of that in there to make them palatable, I guess.
Yes. And I guess we didn't at the time call it a low carb diet, and our emphasis was on sugars and just getting our head slowly around how much sugar is in foods, and so much of his diet, so much of our diet naturally was high in the carbohydrates that convert to sugars really, really quickly. And we were feeding gut problems, and he just needed some time for his gut to develop, slowly and to repair itself, and then foods to be over time reintroduced. And because it was restrictive, it was repetitive type foods. I mentioned the stews quite a few times, but he was eating that almost on a daily basis. Yeah, and it felt really, really good to be kind of learning about old-fashioned traditional foods that nourish your body and nourish your children, and a real reckoning for what food can do, but also how kind of blind we are really to what we're putting in to our children and calling it healthy, because we just don't know. And that's what we've been told is healthy.
And how old is he now? What's his skin like now?
His skin's brilliant still. In the last 5 to 6 years, he's had very, very, very little skin problems. He's had one dry patch, nothing compared to what it was. And he's had no welts, no urticaria, and he's had, really, really importantly, he's had no patches of hair falling out. That was really distressing, but seeing patches of his hair fall out, big patches and bold, shiny scalp, you just can't, as a mum, you can't help but worry, is it going to be picked on? Is it going to be like this? Is he going to lose all of his hair? What's going to happen in the future? So to turn it around was wonderful, and to do that rapidly and I believe through food was really awesome. He's good. He loves food. He just loves it. Any food.
Fantastic. Well, that's had a real impact on him. So tell us about your other child.
So just under 2 years after we had Rudy, we had Leafy, our little girl, and she was a lovely, lovely, happy, really content little baby, and we were, I think, focused on kind of fixing Rudy and his skin, but we were really, really happy as well, and living life, and she had no skin problems, no health problems. She was like Rudy, really robust in that she bounced back from any cough or cold or anything. But then around 6 months old, she'd just turned 6 months old, she had a febrile seizure. So how that happened was, it was around 11 o'clock at night. She was asleep, I was asleep in the bedroom, and I heard a noise that must have or did wake me up, and it was a repetitive sound coming from her cot. So I went over to check on her, and she was making repetitive kind of movements with her arms and her legs. She was clenching and then releasing and tensing and releasing. And she was dribbling. She turned a funny colour. Her eyes were fixed. It was really horrible to see her like that. And we were just completely panicked. I called Justin, woke him up, and asked him to call an ambulance straight away. And they came within 4 minutes. They were awesome. And they stayed on the phone and talked us through putting her in a recovery position and making sure she could breathe. And then she was blue lighted to hospital, and there she was checked over and assessed. And the seizure, as we were told it was a seizure, it was around 26 minutes long.
Wow.
Yeah, really long, and absolutely exhausting.
Terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying. We were strangely quite calm. I think you just kind of go through the motions and kind of deal with it. But the ambulance took over anyway and dealt with it all. But it was, seeing her like that was absolutely terrifying, and not being able to do anything and it not stopping. And then being told that she needed medication, or, it just didn't stop. So, and she was absolutely exhausted. It was really, really depleted. She fell asleep for hours and hours and hours afterwards. And me and Leafy stayed on the ward, and she was assessed, lots of different observations mainly. And they found a small minor childhood illness. I can't quite remember what it was, but it was probably something like a minor ear infection. And the first we'd known about it, that she had an illness, was the seizure. That had spiked her temperature, and she'd gone into this seizure. And they were great. They explained to us that, how common this can be, and how children grow out of it. And they gave us some percentages of the children that have them.
Yes, it is a common thing, isn't it? It's to do with as soon as the temperature goes above a certain point. I have a feeling certainly one of my nephews has got close to it. I think, in fact, had a very short seizure. It's all about that temperature, isn't it? And like you say, it is actually pretty common, but I can't imagine anything much more terrifying. And it was obviously a lot more prolonged in your case.
Yeah, and so her temperature had been quite low. So for a raised temperature, she wasn't massively hot either. So I think, it differs for different children, but above maybe 38.5 or higher than that range, 39, 40, you could go into one of these. But she'd gone into this at quite a low threshold of increased raised temperature. The length of it was really disturbing, but I had this kind of complete feeling that this would be a one-off, and we wouldn't have this again, because we had never seen any seizures. We had no seizures in our family history. She was just so healthy and looked the picture of health apart from this. Just kind of felt quite confident that it wouldn't happen again. And they said the likelihood is it won't happen again. And then, unfortunately, 3 weeks later, I was bathing the children, and I just put Leafy in the bath with Rudy, and she went into another seizure. And again, I called the ambulance, took her out the bath, and put her in the recovery position that they taught us. And they came quite quickly again. This time they took her into hospital, and we stayed for almost a week, me and Leafy. And in that time, she had different scans, different assessments. She had an MRI brain scan looking for bleeds to the brain or tumours, abnormal brain mass. And then she had an EEG, which was where they glue the probes to your scalp and then record your brainwave activity. And she had I think she had an IV drip as well for potential, antibiotics in case of meningitis, but that was precautionary. They didn't suspect that. So she had a lot of stuff thrown at her, and she was observed every few hours. So the sleep was impossible, and I think it's pretty horrendous, like being on a ward, sleeping there, trying to eat, trying to sleep, trying to live on a ward, and just the fear of what the results were going to be of any of those tests, and what on earth was going on, why she'd had another 26, 27 minute long seizure that hadn't stopped, needed strong medication again to stop it. So it was really, really, stressful. Is that enough of a word? I'm not sure. We were super distressed. And then Justin was coming into hospital and he was trying to kind of juggle everything, trying to support us and bring in the things that we needed to stay there. And we didn't know how long we would be there. And then also managing Rudy, who was missing me. It was tough times really. But we were really relieved to get out of there with, and she had, all of her scans came back clear, which was fantastic. And it was put down that she had complex febrile seizures. So we were told she might have more, but the likelihood again was that she would grow out of them. And the complex, not just febrile seizures, was because they were so long. They were over 5 minutes, very lengthy, and they needed medication. Otherwise they weren't stopping. So, again, we carried on. We kind of got back. She bounced back brilliantly after the exhaustion of the seizure and the medication and the tests and the lack of sleep. She bounced back and we picked up the pieces and cracked on again. And then weeks later, maybe a month later, she had another lengthy seizure. And again, we were blue lighted into hospital. And then this just continued. This became a bit of a pattern where every so often, every few weeks, she would have another lengthy seizure. And she was always checked and assessed, and a childhood illness of some description would be found. Like kids pick up things, babies pick up things. That's how they're developing their immune system. And it was never a big illness. It was always a minor cough, cold, sore throat, a little bit of a gastro bug. But her bodily response was that she would have a febrile seizure. It was really, really tough times, and it became almost every 3 weeks. It seemed almost, that she would have a seizure, but so unpredictable whether we were out and about shopping or trying to go to a play date or trying to go to a child's birthday party. It could be anywhere, and it just became so awkward to kind of go out with 2 young children and with that total fear that I might not be able to deal with her and look after a toddler, keep him safe while dealing with an emergency. It was really daunting for me.
So unsettling and disruptive. And I think the importance of your partner comes in there. I know my sister, one of her sons has been in and out of hospital quite a few times with, I don't think they won't actually diagnose asthma until a certain age, will they? But that kind of problem, breathing problems, and it's a similar thing where he gets a cold or something like that, and then it just goes to his chest and then ends up in hospital, and they never quite know when it's going to happen. It's happened a couple of times when they've been on holiday, and like you say, the disruption, especially when there's more than one child. But the thing that I'm always so thankful for, and I'm sure she is as well. She has, her husband there, they're a team, and there's, one of them always stays in hospital, but one of them's at home, and the family support that's around as well. I mean, I just can't imagine how someone on their own would have to deal with that, as hard as it is in a family unit. I mean, it's incomprehensible. But like you say, you then start to second guess every element of your life. Or do I go and do this on my own with the 2 of them? It must just become a constant worry every day with everything you do.
It was a real worry. I'm not sure. It was really isolating. I think that's the word that I use. I felt like I just didn't fancy going out with them, and it was the unpredictability of it all. That was like the major thing. This could happen anywhere. But it was also that I was so worried and so kind of distressed about it, and so scared for her future, what was happening, what was this thing, what was causing these to keep coming, what was going on, that I guess I didn't fancy going to mum's groups and kind of talking about the weather and just chatting about the normal milestones and stuff. I was just so stressed and freaked out. So it was a really isolating, crappy time. And talking about support, you're so right. Justin, my husband, was utterly amazing. We were a total team through it. He'd pick up when I was just so exhausted, and we tended to deal with all of the seizures together. And she had a seizure in the night, we'd kind of both deal with it to support each other, because it's each one. I just don't think I ever got used to it. I think I was actually the calmest in the beginning with my kind of complete confidence it wouldn't happen again and it was a one-off, and it just watching more and more became quite frightening, not knowing when they would stop, how long they would go on for, whether the medication would work, whether the ambulance would get there. The fear as well that's associated with it, that you don't know, I'm reading about things like SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, and completely freaked out that she could pass away, or talking to epilepsy communities online and finding out about the potential for brain damage, and that that people we know in the community, that their children have suffered from really, really long seizures. So yeah, Justin was amazing, and we kind of were a unit in it, and it was I'd say really dark times for us, and just not knowing what to do, what to expect, and what was going on, and what the future held for her.
Yes, because I can remember you talking about the importance of of all sorts of different ages, but those very young ages where you talked about the developmental milestones, but development of a child's brain is so important, isn't it, at that time, that I can see how worrying it would be that something that's affecting her brain, you're thinking, well, what kind of long-term impact is this going to have on her?
Absolutely. And there's a number of different ways it can impact. It all seemed very doom and gloom. Well, it was. You could suffer brain damage with these really long, prolonged seizures that were taking a very long time to stop. And if they kept coming and coming and coming, what kind of effect they were going to have on her brain and her body. And then also we were because it was a febrile seizure condition, Leafy wasn't medicated, and each appointment with our hospital team, and they explained to us what the protocol was for if she did have a epileptic seizure, which would be a seizure that wasn't associated with an illness and hadn't been caused by raising temperature.
Oh, right. I was going to ask you the difference there. So that's the difference. The febrile seizures is when it's caused by an illness, and it's this whole temperature rising business. That's the difference. I see.
Exactly.
So it's like a responsive thing as opposed to a condition like epilepsy.
Yes. So with it being febrile seizures, the diagnosis being complex febrile seizures, there wasn't or isn't a treatment as far as I know. We were told that the AED, the anti-epileptic drugs that are offered for epileptic seizures, are not offered for febrile seizure conditions because they don't have the same impact on managing the seizures. But if her condition were to change, if a non-febrile seizure were noticed, so if she had a seizure that wasn't connected to a childhood illness, or a noted increase in temperature, then she would then have a different diagnosis of epilepsy. And they explained this at each appointment, and they explained as well the treatment, which is anti-epileptic medication, and it's different for different seizure conditions, different seizure types, and whether you're a child or an adult. So they explained the first one that she would go on if her diagnosis changed would be sodium valproate, and we obviously wanted her not to be having these seizures. We're really concerned about the outcome, and that they seemed to be, well, they were continuing and kept coming, and the impact it was having on her. But we were also quite concerned about the option of medication being the only option, and they explained to us as well that a low dose would be given initially, and then a monthly or every so often that would be increased until the seizures were controlled and they weren't coming. Or another medication might need to be added in, might need multiple medications, or we might need to wean a medication. And there was a number of different ones that they mentioned that can be used successfully for children for managing epilepsy. But at this stage, we didn't need it because she was having febrile seizures that we were hoping she would come out of. So while we were reading up at night, we were reading about all sorts of different seizure conditions, what the triggers were, what the statistics were of growing out of febrile seizures, and the different treatments. I came across a blog of a family in Canada, and they were managing their daughter's epileptic seizure condition with a diet, and their daughter was taking to school a pot of olive oil, and she was drinking that with every snack and every meal, and she needed to be very, very consistent with that, and that diet was managing her epilepsy. So I found out about the ketogenic diet, and that's how I found out about it. We discussed it. This was exciting to us. We're big believers in nutrition after what happened with our son, and generally, I think we were pretty daunted by the idea of giving her strong medication at a formative time of cognitive development. The information we were reading very much suggested that there's different side effects for different people, but they were really concerning to us, particularly those that are around cognitive dampening effects, and may cause learning difficulties, may cause aggression, may cause convulsions. It was a huge long list of in the medication that we would be giving her first.
Yes, I remember you putting a slide up of all the potential side effects, and yes, they were pretty daunting. They're
really daunting, and I mean, I think all of them: the liver problems, the kidney problems, the bone issues, the fertility problems have been in the news for that particular medication recently, and like that. They're all individually really daunting, but for me as a mum, I've just wanted her to reach her potential and be given that opportunity, and to be giving her something to dampen her brainwave activity to manage seizures. It's such a trade-off in terms of is she going to be able to reach her full potential in her development. So it was a massive concern, and I did raise that a few times at meetings, but the doctors were not so concerned about that. The side effects, they really kind of downplayed them. And we know it's super important to manage the seizures because of all the concerns around them not being managed. So, but we did look into the ketogenic diet, and on the slide that you mentioned, I've compared the ketogenic diet side effects to the first medication she would be put on if she had epileptic seizures. So I don't know how many were on the medication side, but there were much less on the ketogenic diet side. But when I mentioned it to our hospital team, the ketogenic diet, could we be considered for that if we needed it? The answer was no, because it's for refractory epilepsy. So it's only for those cases where medication has failed to successfully control the seizures. So it's for the most poorly children, and it's not palatable. It's really difficult to get compliance. It's a really unpleasant diet. And the side effects of ketoacidosis and risk of bone breakages, risk of children not meeting their height potential, they really explain those very clearly to us and emphasise them. But I didn't get the same emphasis with the medication. And I know that the protocol and the standard offering is medication, and for some people that works. But for me, the diet was looking like quite an attractive alternative if we needed it. So we decided at this point, she was she was just over 18 months. We decided to go to Australia. Justin is Australian, and we thought, right, maybe some sunshine, more outdoor lifestyle, and less bugs, less, maybe it will boost her immune system. She'll get less seizures. Maybe we'll get a second opinion as well. And we decided to see if relocating out there near Justin's family would work out for us. And we kind of thought it would, really. We thought healthy outdoor wholesome kind of lifestyle would be a good look. So off we went. Leafy had her worst seizure on the way out. No, not on the way out, just as we arrived in Australia. She had a 47 minute long seizure.
Wow.
We carry medication, and that didn't work. When the ambulance finally arrived, that their medication that they gave her didn't work and didn't stop it. It was utterly terrifying. We were all really exhausted from such a long trip, and it was terrifying when the medication just didn't stop it. So at customs, she went into this seizure. So we were being held in behind her because we hadn't showed our passports, and we were not. It was pretty horrendous anyway, that whole experience. And we ended up starting our kind of new experience in Australia with time in the children's hospital near the airport in Perth. So that was a bad start, but it got worse from there. She just seemed to react to the heat, and she did. The heat just kind of did her in, and the seizures started coming thick and fast, and she was having new types of seizures. They were daily. She began having clusters of them. They were affecting her walking, her speech. She became wobbly on her feet. She was distressed and she was crying for hours and hours. It was taking me 4 hours to settle her to sleep at night, and the slightest cough or sound would wake her up. So she wasn't, healthy in herself. She was unhappy. She was distressed. And it was an absolutely awful experience.
Was the heat a factor there then? I know you mentioned before that she seemed to have a lower base temperature than was the norm. And if the raising of the temperature potentially caused some seizures, I'm wondering, that was a factor just in itself, was it?
It seemed to be. It definitely seemed to be. And changes of temperature. So aircon, she didn't get on with the aircon coming in from the heat into the cool, didn't work for her either. So she'd go into a seizure. So it meant we couldn't go into cool buildings. We couldn't go in the heat.
Goodness.
And the beach was a trigger. And and she wasn't sleeping. It was utterly horrendous. So, and her seizures escalated from maybe she was having one every few weeks. That was quite long. To she was having them, at this point she started having them twice a week. And she was also having daily seizures at 60 a day, short seizures, clusters that lasted 2 seconds, but they jolted her eyes, they affected her speech and her balance. So it was horrendous. And so we went to the hospital and they checked her out, and they said, they did another EEG and noticed that she was having epileptic seizure activity. So her diagnosis changed at that point. And as I said, we had been looking at the ketogenic diet, Justin and I, for quite a long time. We'd been talking to our hospital team, and it was a definite no, it wouldn't be supported. But for us, it was a preferred option. We just could not understand why we would not try diet before we would try medication. If we needed the medication, we would use it. But why wouldn't we try diet first? So we were convinced that would be our first port of call. And we prepared, because we were preparing for an epileptic diagnosis at some point. It just wasn't going well with all of the seizures that she was having, for her to be able to grow out of it. So we were getting ready and do what we needed to do. So we had that in place. We talked to the ketogenic diet team in Australia and told them that that was our preference. That's the way we would go. And they were quite calm about that. They were fine about it. I don't think it would have been the same approach in England as in Australia. It definitely seemed that she was our daughter and we could take sensible steps to manage her health. If we communicated with them, I think the English protocol, and not just of our team, but generally, would be that you must follow the medical protocol. So we were in the right place to do what we thought was best for her. So we took her home from the hospital, 3.5 hours journey to where we were staying. And then we started on the ketogenic diet pretty much straight away. And within 3 days, she was producing ketones beautifully. She liked the food. She was never a carb girl. She was not fussed about it. So we didn't have to change her diet radically. We opted, I explained, didn't I, in my talk, that we opted for a 2-to-1 ratio. So the macronutrients were 2 portions of fat to 1 portion of carbohydrate and protein. And that was different from if we had been considered for support in hospital. It was different because we were having less fat. The ratio would have been 3.5 or 4 portions of fat to every 1 of protein and carbohydrate. And that was significant for me because I felt we could manage that ourselves as parents better. It was going to be more sustainable. We could get a wide variety of nutrient-dense, low-starch carbohydrates into her, which was a major factor for us in offsetting any potential side effects that can come with a ketogenic diet, particularly a classical ratio for use for controlling epilepsy. So it came together fairly well. It was a bit hairy in the beginning because we were learning carb ratios and counting carbs, and I'd never counted anything before, never really looked into the macronutrients of the ratios of an egg and an onion and everything, every single piece of food. And we were weighing and measuring, and I say we because it was very much a team effort.
And you had to get a lot more precise about things.
When it's for your child and it's a medical ketogenic diet, I wanted to be very, very precise. I logged absolutely everything, weighed everything, measured everything. We did contact a local dietitian and she worked with us. So she gave us her support, which was great to have that backup. And she was lovely. And yeah, we had lots of logs, lots of weighing and lots of measuring. And we did make mistakes in the beginning, cooking really, really late into the night, making frittatas and eggs dishes and little pots of things that she wasn't familiar with and didn't particularly like the look of and smell of, and they were horrible pretty much. And we just needed to have kept it much more basic and go avocados, macadamias, olives, just eggs, just keep life really, really simple. I would definitely have changed how I worked it in the beginning. We really exhausted ourselves actually making different concoctions that weren't really that necessary. But the good news was that she took to most of the foods and didn't miss out on anything, produced ketones, and her seizures just dropped away. It was wonderful. It really, really was, for her, the right therapy at the right time. Made an enormous impact on her so quickly. So she was, like I was saying, her seizures were spiraling downwards, her distress, her sleep, everything. Within days, the short burst seizures that she was starting to they were creeping up and up and up and up. There were over 60 clusters of those a day. They just went and they've never come back. They're myoclonic seizures. So she's now 4.5 years, is that right, into this ketosis diet, and she's never had another one.
Incredible.
Yeah, they were the ones, it was all pretty disturbing, but that was a major win because other children were noticing them and starting to tease her in the playground, and that was breaking my heart completely as a mum. And it was affecting her speech, would have been really difficult for her to continue with those. And so they went, and then the major seizure type, tonic-clonic, that gone from 3 weekly to now twice a week, they started dramatically becoming shorter, and then over time they became fortnightly instead of twice a week, and then monthly, and then massive seizure-free gaps. That seizure reduction happened super, super quickly. They became self-resolving as well. So instead of having to give her really strong medication to stop the seizures, when they did happen, they were stopping. So that was the ketogenic diet was just such an amazing lifesaver for our whole family. Her sleep started to improve. The first thing I noticed was it was deeper. So she wouldn't be disturbed at any little tiny sound. And then eventually it became quicker to get her to settle and get her to sleep. She didn't have another episode of screaming, crying, distress, since ketosis started. And she just emerged as herself again. Like, we got her back, and I just dread to think where we were going with her as a person, what was going to happen to her, and all of these effects on her health and taking a toll on her.
We can see that knock-on effect. You just mentioned the knock-on effect going back the other way with her sleep improving, but then with her sleep improving and with it going back the other way where her sleep was declining and her health declined. But as her sleep starts improving, that gives her brain the chance to have that rest and restorative process that it needs with that deep sleep. And that is going to, again, that knock-on effect is going back the right way again, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a whole picture. It's, you can't be healthy if you're not getting the sleep, and if you're distressed, and then your immune system is taking a knock. And also, I believe that, you're setting neuro pathways for these seizures, these reoccurring seizures. It's going to set a default. They are going to get more frequent, potentially get longer, more, cause more damage. The more and more you have, the more frequent. So to to stop that pattern in its tracks and reverse that, and so quickly, was utterly awesome. And we haven't had another ambulance trip. She's never needed an emergency trip to the hospital, and not had another overnight stay on a hospital ward. We've talked about her development and the dampening effect of the drugs. Well, the ketogenic diet, as you know, has the opposite effect. It's brain protective, and so she's in mainstream schools. She's completely thriving. She's where she should be with all her milestones. Would that have been the case? I very much doubt it if we'd have not controlled the seizures at the point we did. But also, I do wonder if we'd have gone for the mainstream therapy, the first option of medication, whether she would be as bright and as happy and healthy as she is. It just, over all areas of her life and her health, it made improvements. And that, of course, had a knock-on effect for us. We could sleep, we could look after her, we could have family time together. And it was our family's absolute miracle. It was amazing. And to think that it's so well known that it has such good efficacy of controlling different types of seizures, so many different conditions, children's seizures particularly, but adults haven't had the attention or the investment. And it's a really, really good evidence-based therapy, and why we can't opt for that through our hospital, I don't know.
So it sounds like you were sort of in the right place to make that decision. It was, I know there are still issues with the medical establishment in Australia, but it sounds like they were more helpful for you embracing that particular change to your lifestyle as a treatment.
I think they were more open to us doing what we needed to do. And I mean, they did tell us clearly we would not be supported through their clinic with ketogenic diet. And that is purely because of resourcing. But they were very frank about it. Again, I like a frank medical conversation. And for me, we're not going to not do something that I think is very, very much worth a try. As a preferred option, first line treatment, because of underfunding. It's not really acceptable. But with our kind of experience of believing in nutrition so much, with have had the wonderful impact on Rudy's health, it just seems a natural thing to try avocados and olives and macadamia nuts over drugs, that would have potentially have an impact on her development. So whether the different systems are that different, I'm not sure. I think ketogenic diet is underfunded generally, and it's still for refractory cases. It's still for those who are the most poorly, or particular conditions that ketogenic diet is known to be most suited for, like GLUT1 and those type of conditions. But yeah, generally families like us, if they rock up to the same hospital with the same type of problems, that they're still going to get the same offer of the same treatment, which is this medication, then that medication, then multiple medications, which is what the families in our community, our epilepsy online communities, that's what they've tried. And they've tried multiple medications, and then eventually they've tried ketogenic diet, and some that's worked for and some it's actually not worked for. And I don't know, I don't have all the answers. It worked brilliantly for our daughter. Maybe as a first line treatment it might have worked for other families better. I don't know. But in combination with medication, I'm not sure, because the tests haven't been carried out, whether it impedes the ketogenic diet's efficiency sometimes. It's a complex subject, but I think as a first line treatment, it's a really, really fantastic option. It
seems like it, especially the approach you took, which was, as you said, the macro balance was a bit easier to deal with, a bit easier to tolerate. It's certainly a good place to start. Perhaps if you have to dial up the fat ratio to make it work, that potentially becomes a bit more difficult and a different decision that has to be made. But starting on the ratios that you did, much more doable, and as it turns out, very effective. And you made the decision to move back to the UK. How soon after starting the ketogenic diet in Australia did you move back?
We'd made the decision to move back. Her health had declined, and just wasn't the healthy move that we'd hoped for. So we had 1 week after we started ketogenic diet, her on the diet to move back. The other thing I haven't emphasised about our diet, 2-to-1 ratio, modified diet, but it was also very much real foods, and not using the formulas that were on offer generally for epileptic patients. And you don't need to use those. You can replace those formulas often with double cream or something else of the same ratio. So we were very much getting her nutrient dense foods, good quality foods, grass-fed butter, avocados and olives, and really, really good natural foods in her. But yeah, we travelled back to the UK and got back under our local clinic, and they explained that she was on the ketogenic diet and how her health pattern had gone and how well controlled she was, and then we've been under the local ketogenic diet clinic since. There's not a clinic in every area. We're fortunate that our hospital that we were already under has a ketogenic diet clinic, so we see them and they check her bloods and they check her we do a diet diary every 6 months and check her nutrient profile, which always comes out absolutely excellent, and she's hitting all her kind of nutrient markers. So it's really good. We're really, really proud of it, actually.
It's fantastic. And I can remember you talking about, what little troopers both of them are, but they're real advocates for the diet, aren't they? They really like shouting about it themselves.
They're really sweet about it. They're really, really, really positive. Leafy, with her keto diet, she's a super, super keto advocate. Anybody who's got a cough or cold or who's poorly in any way, she'll tell them that they need to go on her diet. But also she'll go to parties and she'll be given sweets and she'll say, oh, no, I'm not allowed sweets. They'll insist, say, oh, you are at a party, of course you can. But she will insistently give them back and say, I'm on a special diet. And it should explain it and should chat about it, but she is proud of it. And I think that is how we framed the diet. We've talked openly and positively about it, and we've said it's making you better, it's nourishing you, it's good food, it's brilliant, it's your amazing diet, and that's how she talks about it. It's my amazing diet. You should go on it, and anywhere she goes, any situation, she's able to kind of turn the foods down, because the amount of times she's been poured a glass of squash when she shouldn't have been, or given something, even at school or at a party. And she's able to quite confidently go and say no. It's quite funny, because some people are completely bemused if she's out and about and a stranger in a restaurant or something gives her a lollipop afterwards. She's like, goes and hands it right back. She's not subtle. I'm not allowed this. This is not good for me. No, so she's wonderful, and I think we've been really, really, really lucky with we don't have any worries with compliance. She can go on a play date at somebody else's house. And I don't have to worry about that she's going to go off the diet or that it's going to be a problem, because she was actually at a play date a few weeks ago, and her pasta courgette noodles that I'd sent round got mixed up somehow, I don't know, with a couple of strands of their pasta in hers. So she just kind of picks it up and marches into the kitchen and hands it back to her. I'm not eating this. So she's a great advocate. Yeah.
What a weight off your mind, though. Like you say, often with young children, they could, almost do something by accident or be persuaded into something. But, knowing that you can 100% rely on her, fantastic.
Oh, yeah, we are really, really lucky. And I just think that's when I've been speaking to other families who are changing their diet for epilepsy or for another condition or for another reason, you get that compliance by being positive about it and creating a really positive home environment and be outgoing with it and talking out openly about it.
Where can people find you? Because you have a lot of free resources and information on your website, don't you?
So we've put together, we've just been so bowled over by the power of nutrition. Keto is utterly amazing for so many different reasons. Real foods, low sugar, and so we've been putting together a resource, Leafy, named after our daughter, ie.org, and we've put together a free sugar-free course, because lots and lots of families ask us how to get started, not necessarily going to the level of keto, but how to improve family food generally. And I definitely believe that real foods and cutting down or even cutting out sugar is the way to go for family health. So we've put together that free resource, and that's on our website. And we've been doing interviews with different people. Some people have on the ketogenic diet for epilepsy. Some people have used sugar-free diets for cancer or bowel disease, different particular health protocols. But the common factor is that they're using food as medicine, using real foods and sugar-free, and maybe low carb and maybe keto. But it's just getting that inspiration out there. I remember reading night after night and not coming across anything that sounded positive. When we were going through rubbish times, we would have just liked a resource that kind of gave us a little bit of hope and positivity. I'm such a believer in nutrition. This is the resource that we needed at that time.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And just being able to turn to somebody that's similar to you, just another ordinary family that you can relate to, and giving you some tips and tricks that are doable, that are not too, overwhelming.
Yeah, that's it. I think, we've also got a Facebook community, and people do ask questions and chat. And I don't want it to ever seem like, oh, we're doing this kind of super keto diet and it's really, really onerous and it's too complicated, and, make people feel it's too hard to kind of improve your diet, or that they're being judged if they don't know what to do. So we're trying to kind of be really open and positive and friendly, and any improvement is an improvement, and any cutting down in sugar or any kind of tip that somebody wants, that somebody's got a little bit of advice for them, or a tip. But yeah, so families that need a little bit of support or just a little bit of advice, that's where I feel that we could kind of help, because it's not just knowing what to eat, but it's also the strategies around the swaps and simple tips and the quick tricks to get your family on board, and to avoid it becoming a battleground and it being a overwhelming, difficult experience. So we've got the online community on Facebook, and we're putting out bits and pieces on tips and swaps and recipes through we've got a membership area now, or a supporters area of our site, and we've got a free course and free resources that we're just trying to kind of do our bits and build up a community and help other families.
Well, and I think it's very powerful just sharing these stories, and people can resonate with them. And like you were saying about just, people not necessarily wanting to go full on into the ketogenic diet, but just generally improving their family's health by reducing sugar. I think quite often, especially if you kind of sell it that way, well, let's just, cut a few things out. Let's just try and overall improve the health by reducing sugars, perhaps reducing some refined carbohydrates and things just a little bit. And they often feel so much better and get so inspired and full of energy just by doing that amount that they're then quite happy and want to take the next step and take it down a little bit more. But that making that really big leap all the way down in one go is just too much, is too overwhelming. But quite often taking those steps down, you feel so much better with each one. You're happy to go on to the next step.
Yeah, it's totally daunting. I was having this conversation online with somebody who was asking, what to have with their porridge. And porridge is something that we generally wouldn't have in the house. We don't have bread. So our daughter is on a keto diet. I'm often in ketosis on a keto diet. Justin mainly is keto. We're probably a low carb family. We don't have pasta and bread and porridge in, but if that is somebody's good swap from Cocoa Pops, that's still a good swap. And, I don't want anyone to feel judged. I want them to feel like they're able to make those steps. And the more we can spread this out and support other people to feel empowered and feel good from this, and see what works for their family and what engages them and what gets them loving food and loving actually good food that's nourishing them, the better it is for everyone. It's actually quite selfishly quite good for me, because we're the family that eat healthily, and that's like quite an it would be so much better to keep spreading it and spreading it. We kind of phrase it really positively, and we're really, really open about it. But we are the family that eat differently, because, we don't have the bread in the restaurant, and we don't have the dessert afterwards. And the more we spread the word, the better. I mean, I'm really, really focused. My background was in, working, on food and lifestyle and, programs. And the amount of ill health from our lifestyles and from our diets that can be prevented, and particularly concerned with families in deprived communities who were, their children are going to suffer the most. Their life expectancy is significantly reduced, which is utterly unacceptable. And their disease risk and the likelihood of their children being overweight, and just how many children are leaving primary school overweight in the UK is just utterly horrendous. And the disease factors and the autoimmune health conditions that have rocketed, I really believe that nutrition has got a major, major part to play in it. So anything we can do to support families, and we've done some work in a local special education needs school, working with pupils there to cook for them for a whole week. And that was a really different type of program. It was really, really full on. They ate breakfast, lunch and dinner with us. And we sent dinner home, and they came in for breakfast, and we did the snacks, and we did their lunch. And it's a really small school. 2 of the students stuck with that all week, which was an amazing compliance. And one of them was significantly more energetic, more positive, more upbeat. The staff were remarking how he's normally so negative and quiet and grumpy. He has something over his head and won't speak for the first 2 hours of every day. He has no lessons in the first 2 hours of every day. But he was noted to be singing and hoovering the common room.
Wow.
And then there was other children and pupils who've got, they couldn't comply for a week because they don't eat in front of anybody, and they've got the same 3 types of foods that they'll eat, which are uber processed. And the win with them was getting them on the last day to try the food, because they haven't tried even food that they cook at school that they say that they, like, and they will eat and they will try. Even that they have not been able to. That they've got fussiness and all sorts of food resistance problems and difficulties. So I think just food is really powerful, and the way you frame it positively, and you have to build relationships, because I work with individuals on their food, and some of that is keto coaching and some of that isn't keto coaching. But it's very much about building that confidence and building that ability to love food and reward yourself with something that's looking after your body. And there's all sorts of different ways that can impact on your life, and whether that's your weight as your focus, or you've got a health condition, or just generally your relationship with food needs to be improved. I'm a massive convert, and want to kind of definitely do as much as I can with people and communities to help.
Oh, what an incredible story, and such a turnaround in the health of your family. It's been a pleasure talking to you about it today. I wonder if you could end the show with a top tip for our listeners.
Okay, yeah, I think I probably mentioned it all the way through really, but it's that it's the positivity. That's the big tip that I would give to anybody and families looking at changing their diet, whether they're going full ketosis or making those shifts and those step changes. Not to focus on what you're taking away from yourself or your children. It's to focus on those lovely good things and build that relationship with food again really positively, maybe through getting back to ingredients or going to a farmer's market, having positive discussions, and also being compassionate. If the children aren't on board that week or that month, or it doesn't look like they're going to accept those changes, just be compassionate about it and take your time. Offer regularly, have pick the bits on the table that they can help themselves to, and slowly build it up. But don't frame it negatively. Frame it really open, really confidently, and really positively.
Yes, because I mean, if it can come from them, it's that's it. Your job is done, isn't it?
And they're developing the confidence, and they're going at their own pace, and they're developing life skills. And love it to see my son cooking an omelette. For me, he's been doing it since age 6, and his friends are amazed when he's chopping cheese or chopping mushrooms. He's got really lovely knife skills, and it doesn't faze him at all when we've got tons of vegetables on the plate, and he's spooning more and more onto his plate, and his friends looking bemused. But yeah, it's when it comes from them, and they're happy with it, and they're confident in themselves. That's when you're onto a winner. Fantastic.
What a wonderful story. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Daisy. Lovely chatting.
To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/ketowoman, or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman podcast website. It's thanks to the 2 Keto Dudes that I'm hosting this podcast. So please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. This week's end quote is from Hippocrates. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. Bye bye, Keto Lovelies.